We finally got our first gameplay look at From the Ashes, which teases boss battles, the Windtraders, and some new locations. Avatar Theory here, hope you're doing well and having a fantastic day. And the From the Ashes gameplay walkthrough released yesterday, which is roughly 6 minutes long and focuses obviously on Sulek because he is the character that you will play in expansion. No, you will not play as your Sarentu character, as I've had that question asked many times, and Ubisoft has confirmed it in a blog post that the expansion will focus specifically on Sulek. But in this gameplay, they do mention this Sarentu, and I do wonder what happens to our Sarentu character, as this expansion does take place after the events of Avatar Fire and Ash, and based on this gameplay, there's a few things that might even hint to what could happen in the movie. Now, as I said, the gameplay is about 6 minutes long, and I highly recommend you watch it for yourself, as it's certainly worth the time. Now, the gameplay walkthrough is narrated by the creative director, Omar, whom I was very fortunate to meet when I was in Los Angeles. And the gameplay opens up by showing us the Aranehe home tree, which is absolutely desolated. I mean, comparing that to what it was in the main game, you know that this game is going to be a much darker, heavier story, specifically with the involvement of the Ash clan. And I'm very, very excited to see other Na'vi in this game, because mostly in the base game, you fought against the RDA, and other Na'vi was mostly in cutscenes. So it'll be really interesting to see their AI interact within this world. Now, this gameplay was captured on PC, and when it opens with Sulek walking towards the RDA base, which has now claimed the Aranehe home tree, you can see there's some red paint on the home tree, which is clearly a sign that the Ash clan has kind of taken over this area along with the RDA, which is quite interesting because we know in Avatar Fire and Ash that Quaritch is going to initiate the alliance between the Ash clan and the RDA, at least by the looks from the trailer, where he brings Varang weapons and tries to convince them to join their fight. And like I said, since this game takes place after Avatar Fire and Ash, it's a pretty clear indication that the alliance between the RDA and the Ash clan will still exist at the end of the movie. Of course, this is just me speculating based on what I'm seeing here, but if you put two and two together, you know, you kind of make this obvious connection, as we know that Una Chaplin, who plays Varang, will be in future movies, and considering, well, that the RDA is still in this expansion, means that they were not wiped out or chased away from Pandora by the end of Avatar Fire and Ash. But going back to From the Ashes, as Sulek uses his Na'vi senses to look at all of the enemies, he says more amp suits, but in Mangkwang colors. They must adorn them with ash and paint, which shows me that the RDA has kind of embraced the ways of the Ash clan, since their tech has the Ash clan paint on them. I mean, why else would the RDA even consider adding Ash clan paint, unless for some reason a part of the RDA went their own way and kind of formed this separate bond with the Ash clan? I don't know, again, this is just me wildly speculating, but it'll be interesting if some of the RDA, much like the end of the first Avatar movie, some of the RDA decided, you know, I don't want this violence, I don't want to fight against the Na'vi anymore, so I'm going to join the quote-unquote good guys, and the other part of the RDA was like, no, you know, I'm gonna stay in quotes evil, and they continue to join the Ash clan, and that's why they have these Ash clan paint on them. I do kind of hope we see these kind of amp suits in the movie. It'll be really awesome to see some of the tech covered in some Ash clan paint, but I digress. As the gameplay continues, Omar says that Sulek is desperately searching for his friends, the Sarentu, again indicating that the Sarentu is still around. And at the end they do show Sulek flying with another character, and I do wonder if that is maybe our Sarentu character, because one of the concept arts that was released for Avatar From the Ashes, we see Sulek arriving at what seems to be a village overtaken by the Ash clan, and on the left there it looks like our Sarento character. So I do wonder if we will meet our Sarento character, how that will work even, because we know co-op will not be a part of From the Ashes, but at least we won't have to wait too much longer to get all of these answers. But then we see Sulek do his first kill on an amp suit with a really awesome animation. Of course, all of this gameplay is in third-person mode because it is a big part of the expansion and the free update coming December the 5th. But I do know you can swap between third and first-person mode if you do want to play the expansion completely in first-person mode. As Sulek uses his Navi senses, you can see some amp suits, some RDA soldiers, gunships, and then of course RDA soldiers in skull suits, which is one of the new enemy types you'll face in From the Ashes. And then Sulek does a really awesome move where he jumps off a platform, shoots a soldier, and then does an animated kill on an amp suit, which I think is really awesome. And if you look at the amp suit that he jumps on, you can see the amp suit has some Ash Clan paint on it, which again is a really nice touch. Then says that at this point Sulek is only equipped with a bow and his knife, and it's very important to remember the part that Sulek has his knife here because later that kind of changes. As Sulek enters the base, you can see that it's completely overrun by the Ash Clan, and you see those tents that we saw from the concept art of Avatar Fire and Ash. And we also saw brief glimpses of that in some of the trailers. Again, as a fan of RDA tech in general, I do like that they combine that with Navi stuff. I mean, one of my favorite outfits in the game is usually the RDA tech or the RDA style, the human gear combined with the Navi gear. And I think the environment is phenomenally done so far. And you can even see a skull of some sorts on the right-hand side there. I'm not sure what creature that is, but interestingly, you can see a handprint on one of those containers, and that print has 4 fingers, clearly indicating that it's a symbol of the Ash Clan. Sulek then continues to kill some soldiers with his bow and arrow, where he then takes down another amp suit with a melee kill. Then the gameplay cuts to inside a cave where everything is on fire, and again this is inside the Aranehe home tree, a place where I spent a lot of time, so it's almost heartbreaking seeing this area completely destroyed. It'll make it that much more impactful when you actually play this section. Sulek then passes a Navi that has died in battle, and then as he's crawling through an area, you hear the Ash Clan talk to another Navi saying or asking, "Tell us where this Sarento is hiding or you will see your people burn." And then it seems like the Ash Clan just outright shot that Navi dead. So obviously that character didn't reveal where the Sarento were hiding. And I do wonder why the Ash Clan is after the Sarento. It'll be interesting if the Sarento gets mentioned in Fire and Ash. But then as Sulek exits home tree, he sees an Ash Clan warrior face off against another Navi, and then the Navi gets cut across the chest, not killed, but just injured, giving us our first encounter of Navi versus Navi. And you can see that it takes some time for Sulek to kill this soldier, which makes me wonder if every Ash Clan enemy is going to be an encounter like this. I mean, in a way it makes sense that a Navi won't be killed as easily as a human soldier. Thus, if you find a group of Ash Clan warriors, you might think twice about just rushing into battle. But Omar does say that as Sulek defeats Monkwan raiders, he gets dog tags that will essentially be XP for his skills. Then as the battle continues, Sulek finally defeats this raider, where it then goes to a cutscene where Sulek tries to tend the wounds of this Navi warrior, but then gets attacked from the back by the raider. He evades the attack, where the raider then stabs and kills that Navi warrior. And then as he approaches Sulek kind of turns the blade, killing the Ash Clan warrior instead. This seemingly was the first time Sulek killed another Navi, which obviously has a big emotional impact on him. And you can see he's looking at the knife in his hand, and then he looks at a broken knife on the floor, thus indicating that his knife broke. And now he's using the knife of the Monkwan raider, which also unlocks his warrior senses. He then grabs the gun, enables warrior senses, which makes him do much more damage, also highlights different enemies, where the action just kicks into next level, where Sulek just takes out enemies left and right, almost going into a berserk mode. And you can also see, aside from skull suits and amp suits, he also takes out some hellhounds, slows down time, and also at one point point uses a weapon that it took from a gunship. Now here you can see the transition from third person to first person, and it's nice to see that seamless transition. You know, no need to pause the game or going into a menu or anything like that. It's just a seamless transition from third person to first person, and you can probably transition back to third person as well. He then uses his ekran Ile to do damage from the sky, and Ile can also attack enemies. And then as the gameplay kind of comes to a close, you can see Sulek take down another amp suit with an animation, use Ile to jump off and attack an amp suit, and then we get different cuts to different sections of the game. And the first cut, like I said, shows Sulek next to another character, and I'm not sure who this character is. At first I thought that this was maybe co-op gameplay of the original game, but right in the middle there you can see the Windtraders, which is our first in-game look at the Windtraders. I didn't really see this when I watched the gameplay initially, but when I paused on this frame I noticed the Windtraders is right there, and you can see 3 of those Medusoids. And I do wonder if Pelak will be on them. And as I mentioned, I do wonder if this character next to Sulek is just a random character, or maybe our Sarentu character. And then we get a brief glimpse at a new area where we can see Sulek riding on a dire horse. And then another shot of Sulek with some burned trees in the background. And then it cuts to Sulek inside of some sort of RDA facility, or maybe some sort of cave. And again, you can clearly see that this is an Ash Clan area because of the paint, the cloth hanging, and specifically the totems and the skulls hanging everywhere. And then we cut to a brief interaction between Sulek and another character, which I'm guessing in this instance could be a Sarentu character, because the voiceover does say, "saved your loved ones." And then it just shows Sulek rip off the gun from one of those gunships, shoot an RDA amp suit with it, use one of his abilities, and then finally fight against another Ash Clan raider, where we then see him use one of those aerial kills with his ekran. What is interesting though is that when the gameplay closes, we see a brief tease of a boss battle of sorts. We can see an Ash Clan ekran here, where Sulek then grabs his rifle as the battle is about to begin, and then it cuts to the title, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora From the Ashes, available December the 19th. Of course, the same day as Avatar Fire and Ash. So even though the gameplay itself is 6 minutes long, there was quite a bit to unpack, and there's still a lot more we don't know about this expansion. I mean, they didn't show us any of the outfits. Does Sulek even have different outfits like our Sarentu character? And what does his skill tree look like? These are all questions which hopefully will be answered before the release of the expansion. But like I said, I highly recommend you check out the gameplay walkthrough for yourself, as it's definitely worth the time and just makes me want to see more of this, because even though the game is essentially 2 years old, it still looks absolutely stunning. I know the game had a lot of problems at launch, and a lot of them I was very critical on. And what's interesting about watching this gameplay in third-person mode is that I remember in an interview with the developers, the reason they said they went for first-person mode is to make the world feel more immersive. Yet when I watched this third-person gameplay reveal, it feels almost like the character is more immersed in third-person mode. Maybe that's just me, but I feel that seeing your character in this world makes it feel more lived in. Maybe third-person mode was always part of the plan. I mean, there's been multiple cutscenes, or trailers specifically, before the release of Frontiers of Pandora, where you saw your Sarentu character in cutscenes. Yet when the game released, those cutscenes were all in first-person mode. So maybe there was third-person mode planned from the beginning, but it just didn't work out the way they intended it to. Maybe it was too buggy, or it just simply didn't work. And it's one of the reasons why the game was delayed. Because remember that Avatar Frontiers of Pandora was initially planned to release December 2022, around the same time as Avatar The Way of Water, but it was delayed by a whole year, which heavily impacted the marketing of this game, but certainly impacted the sales as well. So now, with this expansion not only releasing around the same time, but the exact same day as Avatar Fire and Ash, it'll certainly be interesting on how people will react to this game, because it seems like third-person mode, the free update coming December the 5th, which is actually in 2 weeks from making this video, does seem like like it makes the game feel like a whole new game. Now, I will certainly be replaying the game in third-person mode. I'm planning to do New Game Plus, but what I would like to know from you is, what do you think of this gameplay reveal? And now that we've seen extended gameplay of third-person mode, how does that make you feel playing Frontiers of Pandora? Do you feel that you will be replaying this game in third-person mode? If you've never finished Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, do you think that you'll go back to the beginning, start a new gameplay with third-person mode? Or if you've been on the fence about this game, do you feel that third-person mode is going to make you pull that trigger and jump into this world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and for more Avatar content, have a look at the rest of my channel. Until next time, have a fantastic day and stay safe.